We'll start with something like this. One of the main reasons for building the bridge, or the two main reasons for building the bridge, was traffic, human traffic, like stagecoaches and things of that nature, transporting people all across from state to state, more so than locally, and also locally as well. They used it. And then, of course, the main reason for building the road, in my opinion, probably more important than the traffic for stagecoaches and things of that nature, was to bring in the products of the West into this state, into the port at Charleston. And of course, in those days, the western North Carolina and eastern Tennessee were largely livestock producing areas because they had open range. In South Carolina, in Greenville County, we had open range till 1870. The cattle ran free in the fields and crops were fenced. So they had open range, and so all of this mountainous area, the people just turned their stock loose. They looked after it and things like that, but it grazed and fed on what was natural out there, like hogs, chestnuts, and things like that. Made wonderful feed for hogs. So in the fall of the year, they would begin to round up their cattle and move them to the markets and to the seaports. And of course, this road was a conduit for that type of traffic. And so ordinary drove of hogs could run anywhere from 200 to 500 or 600 head of hogs in a drove. And they came on foot. And of course, they had to have, I don't know, we'll say 8 or 10 drovers, men who sometimes on horseback, sometimes on foot, kept those hogs in the road and kept them moving. And they moved a drove of hogs would move about 8 or 10 miles in a day. Therefore, all up and down this road, there had to be places to accommodate this stock, because you could not bring the feed with them, transport the feed, because the animals were transporting themselves. They usually brought a wagon with a few things in a wagon. So a business developed up and down the road, the state road, and other roads as well, was called drover's stands. In other words, the men would build a bunch of lots out of rails to start with, enclosures. So if you came in there with 400 head of hogs late in the day after about 8 or 10 miles, and going to stay at his drover's stand, you would drive your hogs into one of these compartments that was fenced off and buy the feed to feed those hogs from him so you could move on the next day. They not only drove hogs, they drove cattle the same way, herds of cattle, and they were handled in the same way. They drove sheep down the road the same way. They drove turkeys on foot. They were the most contentious of all. They could hardly control the turkeys. But sometimes they wouldn't get to a drover stand. They would decide, they'd fly up in the trees on the side of the road and decide where they were going to spend the night. And Mr. Tanksley up at River Falls told me about, first I heard, I'd never read it, about how difficult it was to get turkeys across streams. See, in those days there were hardly any bridges, except in the larger streams. You forded always on rock. And he said sometimes it'd take a half a day or better with a flock of turkeys they would drive down. They'd go up and down the river trying to find a place, a creek, trying to find a place that would suit the turkeys to cross. Take up a lot of time. So they moved this product along. Of course, that was a nice trip. A lot of these drovers, see, they'd never been outside of their area, particularly young boys, to get to come down and help drive a drover. Well, they used a staff. They had different things. Like with turkeys, they used a long stick, staff-like, to kind of keep them moving. A lot of times they'd walk along in the front of the animals, dropping a little corn down. See, all animals usually follow a leader like people, and ways like that to motivate them to keep on and to keep moving. And so horses, all didn't move. Horses and mules could move horses and mules about 10 or 15 miles a day. They'd move a little faster. But cattle and hogs was about 8 or 10. Of course, they were selling to hogs and things along the road. Now, the story's told above Traveler's Rest about how different things had happened. These drovers would gamble with the people, naturally, because they'd have to camp there and things like that. Well, they didn't have anything going back, but they came back loaded.